I'm recording this one day before the end of 2024, but the circular nature of game dev and game design discourse continues no matter what. And for today's video, it's time to return to the dreaded topic of yellow paint. What does it mean for games? Is it good, bad, indifferent design? And why do certain aspects of design work or don't work in the player's eyes? Yellow paint seems to be the latest, again, repeated topic along with, are video games art? Do games need difficulty sliders? Is approachability and accessibility good? And there's probably a few other ones I'm forgetting in the meantime. But the latest discourse is of course on the topic of the infamous yellow paint, that mysterious substance that seems to always guide the player's eyes to where they need to go, or where there's a secret or something else to do. And when it comes to the use of yellow paint, there's two facts that cannot be denied, because these are both very much true. Yellow paint is bad design. It is always bad design. It is a failure of the environmental and level design to properly guide the player's eyes and attention from point A to point B. And when it's included in a game, it is usually there because something has been messed up or a solution was not to be found. The other point is that at the end of the day, if you have to make a decision to include yellow paint in your game or not include it, it is better to have it in your title. Because at the end of the day, it is infinitely better to make sure that the player knows completely where they need to go, rather than having them be confused. Now, those last two sentences may sound like they're a contradiction to each other, but they're not. You see, when it comes to game design, as we've said in many videos and talks on this channel, there is no perfect guide to making a game. There are no checklists that you can follow exactly that will get your game the Game of the Year winner and be the perfect 10 out of 10, hits every demographic flawlessly title that's out there. But there are aspects of design that you need to learn and need to understand. Something that is in a game that works doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And likewise, good design practices may not be the best answer if you're building something that is very specific or a very unique experience. Something like a La Mulana, Getting Over It, or even something like Balatro that has really blown up, of course, in 2024. Now, how this relates to yellow paint and to design itself is that when we talk about the use of yellow paint, as I said, this is a band-aid fix. And no matter if anyone argues that point, even if they have shipped countless games, if they made plenty of AA, AAA, quadruple A games, it's still poor form to need it. That's different from saying that it should be or it needs to be in a game. As I said a few minutes ago, you don't want the player to get lost. You want them to feel frustrated about your experience. But the problem and why yellow paint is implemented is for two distinct reasons. First is the player is simply getting lost. They don't know where they're supposed to go. Is it that door? Is it that door? Is it up there? Is it down there? Who knows? The other reason why it's used is if you're trying to point out specific aspects of the level that the player should be focusing on. This point's going to come out in a very big example in the next minute or two. At the end of the day, you should not be relying on yellow paint. As I said, this to me is pointing out a failure of the game's design. But you need to have a fix, and yellow paint is universally the duct tape of exploration in games. It is, at this moment, as, natural to video games as having the red bar equals health, the blue bar equals mana, and potions and all that will go with it. But when we talk about good level and environmental design, this is something, and again, when we talk about the use of yellow paint, it is the most indicative in 3D games. And the reason why is that 3D comes with it an added difficulty when it comes to level and world design. When we talk about 2D games, Mario's, Sonic's, Metroidvanias, and all that. 2D is designed to be very precise. Every element on screen is there for a reason. That platform moving up and down, the enemy circling overhead, the Medusa head doing this all over the place. These are there in order to, again, create this distinct level. In a 2D space, level and environmental design are intertwined. Because again, you don't have the luxury in 2D to be able to show a lot of extra detail in the world. Again, backgrounds and multiple layers notwithstanding. When it comes to 3D, one of the easiest traps that I've seen from a lot of designers when we're making their first 3D game is treating space as level design. As in, the more space we have, the more level we have. The more level we have, the better the game is. Because again, as we all know, quantity is better than quality in terms of your games. And with 3D space, and especially from indie developers, there is this tendency to go massive. There may only be 3 buildings on the entire map the player needs to go to, but let's still build this level 7 times the size of Texas, and just fill it with rivers and forests and rocks, lots and lots of rocks and paths that lead nowhere, and the player will just wander around, and maybe we'll hide a secret somewhere. The problem is that this is not level design. And it's important to understand the distinction between environmental design and level design when you're building the space in the game. And that takes me to the kind of big example I want to talk about, and that is Half-Life 2. At the moment as I'm recording this, I'm writing a piece for Superjump, or part of a piece, honoring the legacy of Half-Life 2, and I got to pick Highway 17 as a level to kind of play through and talk about. So I'm going to go into slideshow mode here because I took a lot of really great screenshots, which unfortunately I found after the fact they couldn't use, so I'm making use of them here whether you like it or not. But But Highway 17 is kind of the first true open world level in the Half-Life series. Now, earlier in Half-Life 2, of course, you have the kind of hovercraft section, but that is still limited by the fact that, well, you're on the water. Highway 17 gives a player a massive, at least massive for the time, amount of real estate to explore. And listening to the developers' commentary on it, the designers were very much aware of they didn't want the player to hate exploring. And they wanted to make sure that getting around levels were as fast and as fun as possible, but they wanted to make sure that the player felt like exploring mattered. That if they saw something cool in the distance, a house, a port, even just a wreckage, that there was something interesting there. The thing they wanted to avoid, and this is something again we see from a lot of developers getting into 3D for the first time, is the scavenger hunt. This idea that, okay, here's a riddle for everyone. We're going to hide a rocket launcher behind a rock. In order to find that rocket launcher, you need to travel 60 miles west from the 3rd waterfall you find in the 7th forest area of the zone. Once you get to that section, head north 27 kilometers until you find a palm tree that's facing southwest. From there, go 10 million centimeters to the north-south in order to find a brick wall where one of the bricks is slightly off. The angle of that brick, when it's hit by light at exactly 6:07 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, will direct you to a possible node that will provide you with a hint to the rocket launcher's location. With all that information in place, how many seconds until you throw something at your computer or leave me an angry comment as you figure out what the heck did I just say over the last minute? When we talk about good level design and the merging of level and environmental design in this respect, it is about trying to make the world work with the level design. This is an evolution that we saw especially from shooters and the FPS genre from the 90s into the 2000s. that if you look at the maps of many FPSs from 1990 and onward, the Dooms, the Quakes, and all that, they are just sprawling corridors going in all different directions. This is a hospital, and there's 18 different corridors intersecting along 17 floors with 15 different colored doors and keys you need to find in order to open everything. When we got to the 2000s and people tried to kind of make video games grow up, it suddenly became more about creating a sense of space. What would a school or a hospital or a park or, I don't know, sewer sections or only strip clubs that were a part of video games circa like 2000 to 2010 had to be in them? And while realism is a major factor, it's also about, again, cluing or guiding the player's attention from point A to point B. We have played on this channel a whole lot of Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, and both Left 4 Deads are great examples, again, of using the environmental details to guide the player through the level. A very quintessential example of this is in the very first level of No Mercy, where the subway that leads you down to the exit, there is one lone light in the whole area shining right on that area, or that door to go down to. Same thing at the end of the second level of No Mercy as well. That, again, you want your environmental and your level design to be working in harmony. The issue, to bring us back to Yellow Paint, and the use or the reason why it needs to be used, is that it's always there to point out the awkwardness of how the levels and the environments are set up. If you build let's say imagine it's like some kind of construction yard, and there's ladders and ramps and more ladders and even more ladders of various shapes and sizes and materials all around the place. But you've only designed one ladder in that sea of ladders that the player can climb up, then the yellow paint is going to be used, because how the heck is the player going to differentiate the one mythical ladder from all the other ladders in Ladderland? I just said ladders a whole lot in the past 40 seconds, didn't I? But this is often the issue when it comes to merging environmental and level design in 3D. When you give the player an entire city with every single room and door and whatever, a Waffle House that you can explore in excruciating 3D detail, how is the player going to know where the heck they're supposed to be going? Because one building can look a lot like the other building. And this is where, of course, the rise of objective markers have come in. The Ubisoft or open world style of, hey, you need to go right here. This is your destination. You have to go right here. Take this path all the way around to get right here. Go right here. Go. Go now. To bring us back to the earlier point about why gamers will like or dislike some of these aspects, Yellow Paint is gamey. It is as gamey can get when it comes to exploration, because it's so apparent. We, or gamers in general, can certainly look past a lot of things when they're having fun or enjoying a game. Again, when we talk about the arguments over realism versus non-realism, and pick any genre under the sun, the problem that Yellow Paint has is that it is instinctively pointing out a problem with your game. If the player doesn't know where they're going and their only clue is the fact that you just threw an entire can of paint on one door in one specific spot, or someone had paint on their belt with a hole in it and it's just like dripping along to make that one path, it just feels very hollow. It's where kind of the mystique of the world falls apart. And that, I think, is another big point about why this is looked more unfavorably on in 3D versus 2D. Kind of the whole impetus and major selling point of 3D is that it is a 3D, or it's a livable space. You're supposed to be interacting and exploring this whole environment. But Yellow Paint, or the use of, if you want to use white paint or any color paint, just pick any paint in the world, it clashes with this idea. The evil grand wizard of this military stronghold is so confused about where things are, he's hired one person to go around and paint the exact windows that someone would need to go through in order to find his evil sanctum for the grand final battle. People do get a kick when things are explained within the universe of the game. A very funny Easter egg from Doom 3 was the explanation of why there's chainsaws on Mars for Doom Guy to start ripping and tearing, or the pre-version of Rip and Tearing that would come in Doom 2016. To wrap things up for this video, yellow paint, or the use and implementation of it, is not good design. That is the major thing I want to get across here, because there's a difference between including it out of necessity and including it because you thought that is the best answer to this. I hope Future Josh is still showing screenshots of Highway 17 here, because again, this was an open-ended area that still has structure to it. There was attention paid in order to make sure that the player is keeping track of where they're supposed to be going. And yes, you can have stuff like the wooden board or the lambda symbol. And again, that is a really good example to bring up. In Half-Life 2, all these secret deposits of bonus resources on the map are marked by the lambda symbol, of course, where Gordon Freeman used to work. This is explained in universe because it became the rallying cry of the Resistance, so they're using this as their supply drops. It makes sense to find these markers and then find something good. Alan Wake did something similar with the, the Lightbringer, Lightkeeper, like that organization, and throwing their symbol up to clue Alan Wake in to know that there's a bonus resource around. This is the kind of stuff that people like. Again, the problem with yellow paint is that it doesn't exist within this universe. Why are we painting here other than, again, by the fact that the level design is not properly guiding the player? But again, conversely on this point, if you don't have yellow paint, if there is no kind of way of guiding the player, they are not figuring out, you don't have an easy to implement solution, then this is that Band-Aid fix. But the point that I want to drill into everyone's head is that at the end of the day, you should not be needing to include it. You should be paying more attention to how your levels are structured, how the environment is being perceived by the player. Because if they're not spotting that fifth red ladder on the northwest side of the warehouse, that is the only ladder that they need to climb up to hit the switch, to pull the conveyor belt, to lower the crane, to move the box, to open up the slide that will then take them to the next area where there are 17 different stairwells with 15 different doors and 8 keys that are all multicolored, that they must solve a Tower of Hanoi puzzle and then a Sokoban moving puzzle for each one in order to open up the door, to get to the switch, to push the button, to open up another lever, to open up the window, to climb to the vent, to get into the room, to grab the key, to then open up the car, to drive away. Then the problem may be something in your design in that respect. For those of you watching, what are some of your favorite examples of when a game goes completely out of character? When we're no longer hiding the fact that you are playing a video game, where the game must tell you 100% this is a game mechanic. You need to do this. Do this right now. Why aren't you doing this? I'll throw a bonus one here. The messages that pop up in the Like a Dragon games, where they tell you very clearly, maybe you want to do a little grinding before this next fight, or before you go visit Majima for the first time. Let me know in the comments down below. I hope all the yellow paint on the thumbnail has guided you to this video, and I will see everyone in our next design video with hopefully a little less brighter colors to go with things. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.